Tonight. My name is Moomen, and tonight we throw the spotlight on the fisheries sector. And we're looking at how to tackle organized crime in fisheries, because organized crime has infiltrated most economic sectors, and fisheries are no exception. Criminal offenses take place across the sector throughout the value chain, from fraudulent catch documentation to money laundering to drug and human trafficking. The impacts go far beyond damaging the ocean environment and fisheries, threatening peace and security, depriving ocean nations of revenue, undermining the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals, threatening food security, and weakening already vulnerable coastal communities. Tonight, as I've already mentioned, we throw the spotlight on how to tackle organized crime within the fisheries sector. And we've got the very right person to help us in this discussion. He is Captain Retired Dr. Kamaldeen Ali. He is the Executive Director of the Center for Maritime Law and Security Africa. Thank you very much, Doc, for accepting our invitation here. We are grateful that you found time to join us. Before we even get into the meat of this conversation, I'd like to start from the point of view of the Center for Maritime Law and Security Africa. Exactly what is it and what do you do there?
Thank you very much for also having me on this program. It's always a pleasure to be on Moomen Tonight.
Thank you.
One of the topical and interactive sessions or shows that we have in this country. And the Center for Maritime Law and Security, SEMLAWS Africa, that I work for and lead activities there as the Executive Director, is a non-governmental organization and a policy think tank. So we are a civil society organization, and our work, as our name suggests, is focused on the maritime domain. And within the spectrum of the maritime domain, we are looking at law, policy, security issues. So these are what we are looking at in the maritime domain. So we are here in Accra, but our activities transcend the borders of Accra across the sub-region. Some of the work we do is here. Some of the work we do is in other countries such as Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Mauritania, Sierra Leone, Nigeria. We do training, we do research, and we also provide policy analysis.
Well, I asked that question because I wanted to put the conversation in perspective, because I realized that recently there was a high-level discussion on what they call sustainable ocean economy, and it involved people from different countries across the world, and you were one of the people, the only Ghanaian perhaps on that panel. Tell me about this discussion, what it was all about, what prompted that conversation in the first place.
Yes, as we know, the ocean space makes a very important part of our global system. Literally, if you look at the Earth, the ocean is about 70% of the Earth space. So it means that, as I always say, we are just living in a tiny land across the ocean. So what it also means is that the vast resources of the ocean, which you may call the blue economy, is very critical to our development. But this has not been happening over the years. Not that it doesn't contribute to development, but a few countries have over the years harnessed the potential of the oceans, whilst many other countries are very low in benefiting from the ocean. At the global level, momentum to make sure that countries benefit from the blue economy or the ocean economy resulted in what was established as a high-level panel on sustainable ocean economy. So these are a few global leaders that are leading the charge or leading the call in three areas. First of all, the need to protect ocean resources, but also importantly, to make sure that ocean resources are exploited sustainably. So which means that we are just not preserving the ocean resources, but we need to exploit them for our socio-economic development in a sustainable way. And the third leg of that is also to make sure that we have equitable sharing of ocean resources, or what you may call the global commons that comes out of the ocean. So these are the three pillars. And That high panel is made up of 14 global leaders, from the Prime Minister of Australia, Canada, our President, the President of Ghana, the President of Namibia, the President of Kenya, Portugal, Norway, Fiji, Indonesia, just to mention a few. So these 14 leaders working globally to make sure that there is a change in the way we perceive our ocean and how we benefit from our ocean. So the high-level panel realized that there is a gap in knowledge from which action can be taken. So they commissioned what has become known as the Blue Papers, and Blue Paper 16 was co-authored by me and 2 others at the global level, with contributions from 5 other people. So literally, I was chosen among the 3 experts globally to author Blue Paper 16 as a global policy paper to guide issues concerning organized crime in the fisheries sector.
Okay, so why? Because the conversation had to do with ocean economy, and from the discussion so far, I gather that every resource that comes from the ocean, including oil, the gas resources, the fisheries, and even maybe when for countries that have coastlines, you were talking about shipment and the revenue that is generated therefrom. But why focus on fisheries in particular?
The fisheries is one of the many blue papers. So the blue paper that I co-authored with some other colleagues is called Organized Crime in Fisheries. Right. And that is actually called Blue Paper 16. There are about 22 blue papers that have been commissioned, and they cover different areas, including, for example, marine spatial planning, one, for example, on marine biotechnology. So there are different papers, and Blue Paper 16 is significantly one of those papers that is supposed to shape this global discourse.
We'll take a short break, Doc, and when we return, I'll ask you specifically to tell me what your findings were. For example, when we return, I'd like to find out from you what the manifestations of these crimes in terms of the fisheries industry are, and who perhaps are involved in such crimes. We'll take a break and return shortly. Please don't go away. Not too far away from today. Are we seeing a comeback? Would you say that HIPIC truly served any purpose? GBC News and on Moomen Tonight as well. We're also streaming live on our website at www.gbcghanaonline.com and also on the Ghana Broadcasting on Facebook. You can join the conversation and watch us even if you are leaving the comfort of your homes. You can still follow the conversation. We're having a conversation with Captain Retired Dr. Kamaldeen Ali, Executive Director, Center for Maritime Law and Security. And we're looking at tackling organized crime in fisheries. Doc, again, thanks for being patient with us here. Before we went for the break, I said I was going to ask you about how these organized crimes in fisheries are manifested. Who is involved? How do you know about these crimes and so on?
Thank you for that question. I would say it is very multidimensional when it comes to organized crime in fisheries. The truth, however, is that most of the time, as apparent as it is, it escapes the attention of governments and institutions, including even global institutions. And this is why it was necessary for us to undertake case studies and to document the issue of organized crime in such a way that it can convey vivid message to people when we are talking about organized crime. So if you're looking at the manifestations of organized crime, you can look at it at different categories. One of the important category is that it is manifested in forgery or fraud. Of course, forgery is an element of fraud. Fisheries and fisheries activity require a lot of documentation through the process. For example, you have to have a vessel, you have to document the vessel, what type of vessel it is, what size it is. You have to document the beneficial ownership of the vessel. You have to document the financing of the vessel. You have to document a license to fish, incorporate a company to fish. For example, if you want to fish within Ghanaian waters as a trawler, document quite a number of things. Because of this trail of documentation, it provides an opportunity for people to be fraudulent in the process of documentation. For example, you can easily take the case of Ghana, where we give licenses, and licenses fees are based on tonnage. You can easily understate the tonnage of your vessel, and in order to pay less fees. So that is one of the processes of fraud when it comes to documentation. Then also you can conceal the beneficial ownership of the vessel through the incorporation process of your company in such a way that you don't pay the right taxes that are supposed to be paid, or in such a way that you escape the jurisdiction of one country. Because depending on how you state the beneficial ownership, we may know whether we have jurisdiction over you, and for that matter can institute investigation over you. So this is one element of it, which you may call fraudulent activities within the chain. And it is also important because apart from the incorporation process where documentations are, you also go to sea to harvest fisheries. And in harvesting fisheries, you can understate what you harvest. And in coming back to shore, you can land fish, or you may fail to land them and transship them somewhere at sea. So again, this is another level of fraudulent activities. When it comes to selling, you can have high value fish, and then you can underdeclare them that you are selling high value fish, so for tax purposes. On the other hand too, you can have low value fish, and you can package them as high value fish to reap in so much profit. So there's a whole lot of documentation fraud that happens. The next level is corruption. In fact, and corruption and this fraudulent documentation normally move hand in hand. You have to corrupt government officials, maybe to get a license, or people front for you when they are not supposed to front for you. One state, for example, or you do what we call exploit or misuse functional authority. You are an authority either at the political level or as somebody working in high level at the public service, and then you make sure that you corrupt that process, and that will lead to organized crime. When we talk about, for example, misuse of authority, one study recently showed that in most African countries, including Ghana, and Ghana was mentioned as one of the typical cases, over 70% of our trawlers are actually owned by people at high level, and including parliamentarians. That cannot be just a coincidence. It means that some people who have close to the source of decision making, not necessarily political decision, but to a source of decision making, are able to exploit the process. So this is another level. Then you can have other manifestations, money laundering. That is you find. Drug trafficking may be associated with organized crime in fisheries, and then there are many more manifestations of this.
So Blue Paper 16 focused on fisheries, but the operational word I find there is organized crime. So is that to say that there are other crimes within the fisheries sector, but these cannot be classified as organized crimes?
Yeah, in a way. For example, you can have a fisherman, for example, in Ghana, may use dynamite at sea to fish, and that is an illegality. Somebody could go to sea, even one trawler could go to sea and fish within the inshore zone. That is also a crime, but that is not organized crime. But when we're talking about organized crime, as defined by the UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, we are looking at people acting together, a number of people acting together with the aim of achieving an illicit end. So this is what we talk about. So Blue Paper 16 is not necessarily about crime in fisheries. It is more about organized crime in fisheries. And this is because, yes, although there are other crimes at fisheries and they are very important, in terms of the impact, it is actual organized crime that is having the highest impact on fisheries. So if you are able to address the issue of organized crime in fisheries, you are at one level of solving the fisheries crime issue. So that is a major problem to solve.
One of the major concerns of people within the fisheries sector has to do with what they call psycho fishing and so on. Does that kind of fishing fall under organized crimes under fishing?
No, it may fall under organized crime in such a way that the way it is manifested in some countries, including Ghana, because if in Ghana at times there is all the argument about whether transshipment is legal or not legal. Perhaps a correct interpretation will show that it is illegal, that our law prohibits it. But if we then accept that it is illegal, then we start the conversation of organized crime. But where we don't agree that transshipment is illegal, then the conversation of organized crime will not even come in, because we'll be saying it is not a crime. So within the context of psycho that you are saying, when we agree that transshipment is something that is illegal, then the question is, who is transshipping and what are they transshipping? Because not only is transshipping illegal, but in the context of psycho, we are talking about trawlers that are harvesting fish that they are not supposed to harvest. So they have committed a fisheries crime in relating to harvesting it. So that's the first crime that they have committed. And then they are then transshipping it, which is another crime. And if we can show the systematic activity that is organized in such a way as to perpetuate this crime, then it becomes an organized crime. The problem we have in Ghana is still the lack of policy acceptance as to whether psycho is illegal or not, although apparently it has got serious implication for our coastal communities, and properly speaking, it is illegal. So you must separate psycho from bycatch. Bycatch is where somebody that is supposed to fish in another way will catch other stocks. But what we are experiencing in the context of Ghana now, which is called psycho, is a deliberate targeting of pelagic species that they are not supposed to target, and that is then that is frozen and sold, and it becomes part of the fish that we have in the market. But in the context of the question you asked, once we accept that this is a crime, then we can then start seeing the manifestation of it being an organized crime. How is it done? Who are the people that play a role in it? Do they declare or they don't declare? Is this intended to evade law enforcement authorities? Then we then see all the manifestation of it as an organized crime.
But in all of this, another important question will be, so you were talking about organized crime, and indeed you've done a research on this and given a report on organized crime in fisheries. Then the question is, and so what? How does it affect me? How does it affect the ordinary man on the streets there who has nothing whatsoever to do with fish except where he goes to the market to buy it and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very important question. And the way you have put it is, of course, from the devil advocate's point of view, but certainly that is where the trust is. Even from the very first person who goes to sea to buy fish, this should matter to him. This should much matter to the person if the person is anywhere in the world, and if the person is here in Ghana, that is more important for the person. You must know that we are one of the greatest fish consuming countries in the world. We are in the top 10 of countries that consume fish in the world. So in terms of animal protein, we depend on fish for over 70% of animal protein. We are also aware that Ghana is one of the biggest fishing nations. So we are just not a fishing nation in terms of our territorial waters. We are a regional fishing nation. And thirdly, our coastal communities depend so much on fisheries and the rest of us through the value chain. So this is why organized crime matters to even the very person that goes out to buy fish. But for us as a larger country, it is important for us. And we can then discuss it in different stages. For example, we can look at the social impact of organized crime, starting from the point of view of food security. And I've already alluded to that. If you were to have a country that depends on a certain food for 70% of its nutrition, then that is a matter no longer of Kamal or Moomen or Kweku. It's a matter of national security. So protecting fisheries in Ghana is a critical issue of national security, because if our fisheries collapse, then that is going to be an important thing. So if organized crime is denying us of the food security that we require in Ghana, and it is indeed doing that and doing that in many other countries, then it is an important issue. So the relationship between organized crime and food security is important, critical for Ghana, critical for the global community.
But Doc, we are importing so much fish for consumption, and so again, it doesn't really matter what happens in there because we are importing and we consume imported fish and so on. So if whatever happens there, we'll still get the fish, contrary to the point you're making, that will become food insecure.
No, we haven't historically imported, and we are importing more. But I'm not sure any policy person in Ghana or policy leader in Ghana will want us to continue the trajectory that we are doing. The truth is that we are importing a lot of fish, and every day it is increasing. But also remember that the fish is a scarce commodity. So if even assuming we have all the money to import fish, but if there is global collapse of fisheries or that in many other places, and it's happening global as well, then it's a problem for us. But I'm sure that we really don't have the money to import fish. And not only are we talking about importing it, but we are talking about fisheries, its relationship to the livelihood of coastal communities. In Ghana, we have close to 3 million people that are directly and indirectly connected to fisheries. And when you look at the chain, it may even go to 6 million people. We are looking at the implications of fisheries also for other things, including gender. So yes, we are importing fish, but we don't necessarily, we don't need to go through that trajectory. We need to look at how we can solve our fisheries problem. And one of it is solving it through the angle of organized crime, which is actually a fundamental one. So in terms of the impact, that is one of the social impact that you can look at. First of all, food security, vulnerabilities in coastal communities, denial of livelihood, and organized crime also having implications for the peace and security of a country. At another level, you look at it at the economic level. Countries are losing, including Ghana. We are losing huge amounts of money through organized crime in fisheries, and we rather now turn to look for money somewhere. You have a resource that you have. If you properly protect it and be able to solve the issues of organized crime that is feasting on it, then you can save a lot of resources. Here is not what we are doing in many other countries, and we are looking for resources. Take, for example, a study that was conducted in 2017, focusing on Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, and Mauritania, because that is a regional fishing bloc. And as much as $3.2 billion is lost through fishery crime. $3.2 billion. Guinea-Bissau alone lost in 2015, 2016, close to $260 million. Look at the economy of Guinea-Bissau. When you come back to Ghana, that is exactly the symptom that you find here. So we are looting huge sums of resources through organized crime, through many of the manifestations that we mentioned. The money is then taken and laundered somewhere. We are becoming poorer, we are looking for money, and we are in a vicious cycle of poverty. So that is another angle. From the economic side also, you can talk about tax evasion, which is an element of it. And these are some of the impacts of organized crime, transcending or going to the environmental impact and the depletion of resources that we can talk about.
But Doc, what you are telling us shouldn't be news to agencies such as IOCO. And you are a former naval officer yourself. Even when you were in office, you should have known about these things. And so if the security apparatus know about these, why haven't they done anything about it?
I think a number of factors. Yes, at times we may know that something exists, but at times in policy space, we don't spend so much attention at looking at it. If we take many countries, including Ghana, I think over the years we have been talking about illegal fisheries, but we don't always connect illegal fisheries to organized crime in fisheries. So we have been dealing with the issues of illegal fisheries, trying to solve the issue of using prohibited net, trying to solve the issue of using prohibited patrolling, you know. So these are the issues we have been talking about. But this is, if you want, this is not even core. This is at the penumbra. The core is to talk about the organized crime. In my experience, the issue of organized crime in fisheries has not really been centered in our policy space. For example, we do talk about organized crime mostly. When we talk about organized crime, drug trafficking will come to our mind. Illicit trafficking in arms and other things will come to our mind. So we don't normally talk about it. So the truth is that there is less prioritization of organized crime within the policy space, both at the decision-making and political level, but more importantly also at the operational level that you are talking about, the enforcement level. So most of those agencies perhaps have not catalyzed their systems in such a way that organized crime in fisheries is one of the things that they are looking at. And I think that will be the reality of it, because if they were doing, then they will be able to start seeing it. But why was this commission global? This was commissioned global because it was accepted even by the UN at 2018 on the back of important UN declarations that there was a deficit in knowledge. A full understanding of the impact of organized crime is not that known. So it was important for such a study to be done so that at the global level, at the UN level, at the UN Security Council level, much as some areas of organized crime is being talked about, then organized crime in fisheries will become one of the central issues to talk about. So it is not necessarily that we as a country are at the end where other people are fully understanding it. There are other developed countries that are also struggling with it, although they are doing far more better than us. But this is the reason why the High Panel on Sustainable Ocean Economy found it important to commission this, so that this can become a global a paper for discussion and can then impact on and shape policies at the national level. So there are other factors, of course, that also account for that. Factors including a lack of coordination at the national level. Because fisheries is always seen somehow as a fisheries issue. And the connection between fisheries and other issues are not really dealt with so much. Even in my experience of serving the oceans for 20 years, that is what I have also realized. It's seen as a fisheries issue, but now the connectivity between fisheries and especially even also the organized crime institutions that we have, it's not that robust because it's just seen as a fisheries issue. So it's because of lack of coordination and lack of an understanding of the need to coordinate even in the first place. So when we start looking at the tracks of organized crime, how it is manifested, then it becomes obvious that we are not dealing with just the Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture Development. We are dealing with IOCO, we are dealing with Financial Intelligence Unit. Of course, we are dealing with those that will be at sea, but it's also important that we are dealing with where companies are incorporated. We are dealing with tax issues, and when we connect this, it becomes obvious that we see the symptoms of organized crime. Take a practical case. If you were to have a fishing trawler or a company that has been fishing in Ghana for a period of, say, 5 years, and they declare a certain level of tax every year, and yet they are still in business for 10 years, what do you think is happening? It is clear that there's organized crime happening. But the question is that, is the discussion going on in that way between the one who is looking at the tax of the company and the one who has given the license for them to fish? So these are some of the areas that we need to look at globally, and that is why this was commissioned, and this is why we now will be talking about it at the national level to see how it can impact and shape our policy and our responses.
Interesting point there. I'll come to the issue of policy later, but let's talk about that. And you have talked about food security, you've talked about the impact on the economy, but I also heard you, and I had the privilege of watching that interaction at that high level. You made points about the fact that organized crime in fisheries can also pose security threats and affect the peace of a country. How?
No, in many ways. In many ways, the truth is that when for every organized crime, that organized crime will then sit within a certain level of criminality. And when we're talking about organized crime in fisheries, we are not just talking about organized crime in relation to the fish, but we are talking about how the fishing industry becomes a conduit also for organized crime. So if you are looking at how the fishing industry become a conduit for organized crime, then you can then start to see the relationship between organized crime in fisheries, not necessarily in fisheries as relate to fish, but how the fisheries industry is exploited for organized crime. So you have, for example, drug trafficking. We've had the MV Benjamin case in Ghana, and there are many other cases. So that is a typical case where the fisheries industry become a conduit for doing what? For perpetuating organized crime, and that has implication for peace and security. We have gun running and trafficking in arms, and there are multiple cases globally where you have had organized crime. We've had cases where fisheries become a means that is exploited to undertake, for example, piracy, for example, and that also has implications for national and regional security. So beyond the issue of organized crime in fisheries in relating to fish, then organized crime also persists in the fishing industry as it is used as a cover. Fishing is then used as a cover, and beneath it, there are a lot of crimes that take place that has got direct implications for peace and security.
And I guess all of this is hidden from the layman, because very few laymen have anything to do with the ocean and whatever happens there. And it's good that you are bringing this to the fore. But let's talk about the environment as well. So there's organized crime in the ocean, at sea. How does it affect the environment?
Well, it affects the environment from the first from the point of view that the sea itself is an environment, and that is 70% of the world. So 70% of the world environment is in the seas. The second element is that it affects the resources. On land, we talk about impact of when we're talking about environmental issue, we also talk about degradation of resources. So we are talking about living resources at sea that are affected tremendously. And when living resources at sea is affected, it also disturbs what we call the ecosystem balance, and that has further implications for the environment and for the society. At a larger level, it is important to know that the ocean is what sustains our health, even on land. And again, once we have substantial imbalance in the ocean space in terms of the ecosystem equation and dynamics, it has got implication for the environment. So much of the discussions when we talk about the implications of organized crime for the environment is in relation to the maritime space, but then there's this correlation between the maritime space and the ocean space and what happens on land.
So organized crime persists in fisheries. Why? Or why is it that for so long a time, and from the discussion we've had so far, I believe this started from Adam, so to speak. Why is it that year on year it appears a lot more people get involved in these crimes in fisheries and so on? What are the factors? Do you know?
Yes, some of the factors we've already alluded to that, and one significant one is the lack of prioritization of organized crime. In many countries, fisheries is described as a fisheries issue, so it is not described as an organized crime issue. And once it's not described as an organized issue, then what happens is that the policy space in terms of its organized crime attention is not on fisheries, it's on other things. If you were to ask most people that what are some of the issues of organized crime that they would think about, they will mention trafficking, drugs, and they may even go and mention terrorism and other things. They will hardly mention this. So there's lack of that prioritization. The second is that there is also the question of legal framework. There's lack of the effectiveness of legal framework and policy framework that is needed to respond to organized crime. You know, we always live in a norm-creating country. And once you don't have the policies, you don't have the law, then in a way you have underdefined the problem, or you have not even defined the problem. And because of that, you run into a situation where you are not able to tackle it from the first place. Then another important dimension why we have manifestation in organized crime is that so far in the context of organized crime, there is lack or there's little interstate cooperation. If you take many of the fishing companies or fishing trawlers and companies that are, for example, registered in Ghana for license, they are equally registered in Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, and many other countries. Perhaps in the context of drug trafficking, we talk to each other and our institutions talk to each other. There's less speaking together when it comes to organized crime in relation to fisheries. So it is possible, and because there's lack of discussion and attention and cross-border collaboration, then they easily exploit this, and this is why it will continue to persist. But there is also a question of lack of knowledge, and again, this is why the High Panel commissioned these blue papers, that it is important that knowledge on issues of organized crime is brought to the fore, and it is also discussed within the policy space, whilst we also look at building the necessary capacity, because you need to track it. You need to be able to go through a documentation process to be able to track the elements of organized crime. Investigative tools are required. So there's also a certain deficit, if you want, in skills and capacity building that is required to provide the tools for agencies that are supposed to deal with this to be able to do so effectively.
I'm taking two key points. You talk about lack of collaboration between countries in terms of fighting organized crime in fisheries. You also talk about lack of knowledge. Now, let me draw your attention to, and again, forgive me if I am repetitive, but it's a point I need to highlight. You worked with the Navy for many years. So the Navy is one arm. Then we have the Marine Police being another arm. Then we have IOCO, I've mentioned that already, being one other arm. Are we then say, and of course, we also do have the Fisheries Commission that's supposed to oversee all of this. Now, you've given these two factors, lack of collaboration, lack of knowledge. Which of them applies to all these other agencies, including the one you work for, that they have not seen the persistent survival of organized crime in fisheries?
No, I think at the global level, it exists at all this at both levels. When it comes to lack of knowledge, the truth is that it is not that we are talking about something that is extremely new, but the truth is that, and as I've emphasized this already, in the knowledge setting where we discuss organized crime in fisheries, it is not something that we have done. We perhaps are aware or seen elements of it, but it is not something that we have synthesized the knowledge. So an individual understanding of something by you and possible by me, either fully or not completely, do not constitute that knowledge that you need within a policy space. In a policy space, you need to aggregate something, discuss it, and institutionally, we can then say we have become aware. So unless we have that institutional knowledge that is aggregated and then it has been reduced into a policy understanding, then we will always say that there is gaps in knowledge. And this is the one of the critical elements that has been found even globally, even at some level of the developing countries. And the question of interagency collaboration is equally the case. You see, it is not that the agencies don't know each other. It is just that certain times the agencies have not developed charters and discussing that thing. Perhaps you will not say that same thing if we were talking about drug trafficking. Perhaps if we were talking about drug trafficking, you'll be able to triangulate a number of Ghanaian agencies and they have developed a charter for working around drug trafficking. I don't think we have necessarily, at least from my experience, and globally we have done research in many other countries, and this was why it wasn't just a single person writing this, people from different parts of the world, but also importantly, a lot of other people contributing. The global results also portray that in many countries, we don't have that charter around organized crime where institutions are talking to each other about it. So, for example, you could just go to a fisheries agency and just do a normal sweep through the vessels that have been registered and the tonnage that they have declared to be what they are. If you were to even go into public sources, you would have traced the history of this vessel and you would have realized that it has declared different tonnage at a different time or different levels. So if agencies were talking to each other, this can easily be tracked. Then you are talking about the financial flows of it. Is it the case, as we speak, that in the context of the Fisheries Ministry, for example, Fisheries Commission, that they bother, for example, to say, how do we track, even as that subject being a discussion, the fisheries companies that have been incorporated, either, of course, certain times they are incorporated as Ghanaian companies, but the truth is that if you went through the accounts of those who have incorporated, then you wouldn't see all the inflow sitting in there. So if you haven't seen the inflow sitting, say, how much have we tracked the financial flows out of that using something like the Financial Intelligence Unit? So the reality is that globally and nationally, the charter that is developed around talking or speaking on organized crime has not been, is either weak, absent, or not robust in many countries.
Doc, you've been able to explain to us what organized crime in fisheries is. You've identified for us what the gaps are and why the organized crime appears to persist and so on. But I'm sure that in your research you also made some recommendations as to how to fill these gaps and solve the problem once and for all. What are these?
Yes, one of the tasks that the High Panel on Blue Ocean Economy gave to all the experts that were commissioned to write these blue papers is to come up with the recommendations that can inform action at both global and national level. So we did that. We aggregated a number of recommendations. We do not say that the recommendations are by any way conclusive or all-encompassing, but it was necessary that we make some tangible recommendation. At one level, we realize that it is important to tackle organized crime. It is important that an understanding of the subject of organized crime is buoyed at international level and also at local level. It has to be, because when you go through the UN, look at critical issues that have been discussed in decades, you go through the Security Council, you don't find that until recently, when the issue of organized crime started picking up from 2016, it hasn't been discussed. So it's important that at the global level that we buoy the knowledge. To do this, a number of recommendations have been made. The United Nations made a resolution that required countries to systematically report and study the issue of organized crime So not that you should just accept it in vacuum, but it is also important for you to study it. So we have asked that this UN declaration is followed through by many countries. So that countries should specifically study the issue of organized crime and its manifestation in fisheries and the linkages and the dynamics that is taking place. So we have asked that this UN declaration should be given attention by countries, and at practical level, countries should do that. We have also recommended that organized crime in fisheries should be one of the things that is discussed at the level of the Security Council. So the UN Security Council should exercise its power in discussing the issue of organized crime in fisheries. They do describe many other issues of organized crime, including terrorism, including drug trafficking and others. So we said it is important that organized crime is on the table because the UN Security Council has such a force globally. So once organized crime becomes one of the subjects on this table annually, then the lack of knowledge in organized crime in a way will be solved at the highest political level. So within this step one, we also said it is important that that there is sharing of information on organized crime issues between countries, and also importantly that states should aggregate around what we call the Copenhagen Declaration of 2018, which require countries to declare not their intention, but their commitment to fighting organized crime. Of course, you don't do that in vacuum. A number of practical tools are there. So this Copenhagen Declaration that currently has, I think, about 16 other countries, 20-something countries. It is important that many other countries make declaration and commitment to that in fighting organized crime. At the next level, which you may call the country level, a number of things are important. One is that interagency cooperation. Mm-hmm. We should look at enhancing interagency cooperation, and we shouldn't do this just by saying it. We must come out with the charter for doing that. Mr. Moomen, the truth is that agencies can only work when you ask them to work together and you develop the charter for them to work together. Otherwise, all agencies, no matter what you want, how you see it, are autonomous, and they have their own mandate and their own turf. So until you come to, for example, ask that these agencies must come every 2 months, 3 months and discuss the subject of organized crime, they will work individually and they will never do that. Not because they don't want to act, but the truth is that that is how agencies and institutions are. They are in a way autonomous, they have their turf and they guard it. That is how they are. So it is important that at the country level, the need for interagency cooperation is made pivotal, and it is done through specific policies and standing orders that require them to do that and to report, for example, to the highest level on how that issue is being dealt with. And one is in the area of legal reforms. Whereas we have many laws relating to fisheries crime, we don't necessarily have in some countries fisheries organized crime in relating to fisheries. Or we may have laws relating to organized crime, but we don't necessarily deploy them in the context of fisheries. We deploy them in other areas. So fixing this legal uncertainty in some countries or lack of full implementation, and in some countries a deficit, is important for us to tackle. One other level of recommendation is to build the capacity of institutions, on the issue of organized crime. So I think at the country level, I'll mention these three to repeat: interagency cooperation, secondly, making sure that legal tools are robust enough to tackle organized crime, and thirdly, ensuring that that there is capacity to deal with the issue of organized crime in fisheries. For each area of crime detection, you need to build capacity. The institutions that deal with that, including the police, IOCO, and everybody will tell you. If I were to be employed in IOCO today, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be able to detect crime. I might be able to given the tools to detect tax crime, but it's also important at some point in time that I'm giving the training and the capacity on the issue of organized crime and fisheries. So this is why the capacity building and skills training is important.
I took my time to read the introduction to Blue Paper 16, which you co-authored, and one of the issues you highlighted, particularly in the introduction, was the fact that organized crime in fisheries has the potential to undermine the achievement of SDGs. That caught my attention because our president is one of the ambassadors of SDGs, and if we have organized crime in fisheries surviving in Ghana, and you have stated it can affect the achievement of SDGs, that should be a problem for us.
Yes, that should be a problem for us, and that is actually affecting the achievement of SDGs globally and in this country. It does that because, in a way, if you look at the SDG 14, life below water, it is shown that attaining some of this, not only do we need to protect the ocean space, but attaining most of the sustainable development goals depend on, the stewardship and how we sustainably use our maritime space. And the sustainable development goals are supposed to give us certain results. Mm-hmm. And if we look at some of those results, or many of those results, they are also pivoted in social enhancement, economic enhancement. So where you have organized crime as a big whole within the blue economy, which is actually the largest economy of the world, then it means that achieving the sustainable development goal is important. And this is why, in terms of a double track, there is much, Ghana must give much attention to this, because not only is our president leading the sustainable development goals at the highest level as one of the co-chair, but again, our president is again one of the 14 global leaders that form the high-level panel. Yes. So it means that we have a double reason to make sure that there's greater momentum in the way we will implement the blue paper. So it is hoped, and I'm sure that may be the case at some point, that our president being one of the global leaders that have commissioned these blue papers, he will then look at having a national translation of these blue papers into action, because I would think that the only reason why at the global level he became one of the leaders that have asked for this and that have commissioned these blue papers is that they want to act on it. So, and to act on it will not only be at the global level, I think, and I expect that it will then have a translation at the national level.
You've taken still, because my next question was going to be, now you have come out with this report, made recommendations, then what next? Because for people like you who are researchers, working for CSOs and so on, after all the work is done, the report ends up on the shelf and no action is taken afterwards. How are you personally, and perhaps with all the other co-authors, going to ensure that not just in Ghana, because you've talked about international collaboration as well, going to ensure that this is adopted, that this is included in national policies across the globe, so that we can feel the impact and reduce the number of these organized crimes that go on in fisheries?
No, I certainly will not overstate my ability to do this. And for so far as this paper is concerned, I was just one of the 3 global experts and 5, 6 others that have been asked to put our attention to this and to come out with something. At that level, it is now with the Secretariat. It has been launched. It was launched on the 18th of August. It is now with the Secretariat, which has been commissioned by the high-level panel. So they will then take the actionable plans, and at some point, I'm sure the high-level panel will gather, look at it, and then make the commitments that they are supposed to make. At individual level, CSO and NGO that I work for, whether or not I was commissioned to write this paper, my voice is always on the issue of maritime issues, including fisheries. So on that front, it is another level of advocacy which we continue to do. Ultimately, it is people that are supposed to implement policy that may or may not find this to be something that they need to do. But it is hoped that given the importance of this data at the global level, that through that channel that is established, it will find a place in transforming policy and translating into result-oriented actions at the national level. Individual countries are already doing this and they are getting results. When Indonesia actually one of the countries that pushed the issue of organized crime, and when they defined organized crime and started looking at organized crime in 2014, Indonesia, just doing scrutiny of the issues of organized crime relating to fisheries, realized that from 2014 they were having 7.3 million metric tons of fisheries declaration. They actually took some of their vessels out, and yet in 2015 they went up to 9.4 metric tons million, so 2 million metric tons, and by 2016 it has gone to almost 13 million metric tons. And through that process, they've saved themselves millions of dollars whilst reducing their fleet. So countries are already benefiting from giving attention to the issue of organized crime and fisheries, and I'm sure that the high-level panel will use that as some of the benchmarks of making sure that it sounds at the global level better and also reflect at the national level.
Wow, Doc, we've run out of time. We'd like to thank you so very much for coming and for educating us on this very technical matter, tackling organized crime in fisheries. We've been speaking with Captain Retired Dr. Kamal Din Ali. He is the Executive Director at the Center for Maritime Law and Security Africa, but he's also a lawyer and a PhD in maritime law. Is it? Yeah. Yes, and more importantly for us here, he's an immediate past member of the board of directors of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. We will always remember that. Thank you very much for your time. We are grateful, and thanks for staying and for watching. We hope you did learn something, and indeed we are confident that policymakers will adopt this